everybody. Welcome to Game Audio Hour number, is this 86? I have to ask every time, don't I? It's 86, the year I graduated high school. Not 1886. I know what you were thinking, Vince. Anyway, it's our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas, the latest techniques, project experiences, to audio secrets. Here's where you'll find your in-depth coverage and opinions related to just Vince and I, because the other two have stood us up.
That's not nice. Those guys are working hard. They're working really hard doing stuff like flying over the Pacific Ocean and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's tough work. That
if Alex cared, he would have gotten one of those Wi-Fi jobbies on his plane. He has nothing better to do, and he could have just zipped right into the show at 40,000 feet.
I was talking to him about that just this last weekend because I met him up in San Francisco during the PlayStation experience that happened there this weekend.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, you should just do the Wi-Fi thing. Who cares about what the other passengers in the cabin say about you chatting about game audio? No, they deserve to be educated and edified about game audio just like everyone else on the internet, right?
Exactly. And we are so entertaining, the whole plane would have just gathered around his seat like family around a fireplace at Christmas. It would have been a beautiful thing. No babies would have cried, nothing.
That would be fantastic. Well, first of all, a plane ride without babies crying, I haven't had that in years. So.
Yeah, the pressure gets on their ears. It's pretty sad. We had a plane ride one time. I want to ask you about PlayStation experience, but we had a plane ride one time when my daughter was a baby, and she was doing really well. And somebody wanted to hold her, and so we said, yeah. It was a short flight. It was into Santa Barbara, so it was a small plane. And so we're right there, and we hand over to somebody, and we can see, and they're holding her, and then somebody else comes up. We want to hold her, so we ended up walking down the aisle, handing Bridget to people so they could hold her, and then got back to our seats. It was pretty funny how friendly everybody was. I was really happy with that.
Oh, that's cool.
There you go. Fun story. Fun dad story. Hey, so tell me about this PlayStation experience. I hear it was quite an experience.
Yeah, PlayStation experience just happened this weekend. This is the second annual Sony PlayStation experience. Last year, it occurred in Las Vegas, and from all accounts, it was a fun and successful event. Thus, the second one that just happened a few days ago. A big event takes over the Moscone West building in San Francisco, and all Sony, all PlayStation, lots of PlayStation 4, a good amount of PlayStation VR as well, and also a little bit of PlayStation Vita for the hardcore fans that search out those PlayStation Vita consoles. But yeah, all Sony all the time, and quite a fun event if you were a hardcore gamer. Concurrently with all the stuff that was happening on the expo floors, which were floor 1 and floor 2, there was also a panel floor on the third floor that had all these different talks about game design topics, story, production stories, designers just talking about what's on their mind. And then on Sunday, they had a nice big Capcom Cup tournament where the 32 best Street Fighter 4 players in the world gathered. Get some money.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, fun times. Very, very fun week.
I have to just do a tech thing here. You're breaking up kind of tough there, Vince. It comes and goes, but it was breaking up kind of heavy. I just didn't want to interrupt because it had these moments where it stayed on pretty good, but then it would break up.
Okay. How about this? Does this sound better?
Yeah, sounds nice and clean right there.
Okay.
But we got what you were saying about the floors, and there were talks, and there was an event where somebody got some money. Some people got money.
Yeah. Cool.
And you saw Alex.
Yeah, I saw Alex there. Alex is not here to talk about all that cool stuff, but I'm going to try my best to talk about it because he can finally talk about his game, and I'm going to steal some of the thunder by saying that the game that his company has been working on for quite a while now has finally been announced. it was part of the Sony keynote on the opening day, Saturday. If you were there or if you were watching on the internet, you probably saw a 1.5 minute trailer for something called the Modern Zombie Taxi Company. And I don't have a lot of swag from PlayStation Experience, but one of the things that I can show is this coaster or beer mat or however you call it for the Modern Zombie Taxi Company. It's for the Sony PlayStation VR, and in it you drive around zombies, mostly to and from various pubs in a post-apocalyptic Earth where zombies are now the dominant life form. No more humans, all zombies. Fun times.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
It
Pretty
looks
cool.
really cool.
Yeah, I love how that the taxi actually looks zombie-ish. That's a nice bit of graphic design. And I'm going to go ahead and say it. Yeah, Alex, you did a good job on the graphic design here. I know you're the audio guy over there, but you're also a really darn good graphic designer too. So
He is. And he did that, huh?
He did do that. So
well done, Alex.
Indeed.
The VT Backroom bringing some VR to the PlayStation Experience.
Yeah, there was a lot of VR stuff going on there. They had, well, they always have not enough VR units to actually go around to the people who want to play. You actually had to reserve various times well in advance. And I could not get in on any of those times, unfortunately.
Alex didn't pull his strings? The almighty Alex May didn't get you in?
Maybe he could have, but I didn't want to press the issue. And, there's also, for developers at PlayStation Experience, it's a lot of work, actually. It's not all fun and games. You can't just sit back and relax. I did run across a whole lot of developers, including audio designers that were hard at work on the show floor. And it's tough having to man those booths. And even if you're not manning the booths, talking to producers, talking to the people at Sony who you're working with, it's a really tough time being able to last a weekend. And even though it was only a 2-day weekend compared to things like Penny Arcade Expo, for example. Penny Arcade Expo is a 4-day week, which is huge. 2 days, that's cool. But with Sony, the days last until 10 p.m. Oh, I don't know how those guys could do that. My brain was already just horrible pain by the time 9 p.m. rolled around because of how crazy it is, how loud it is. It's a really fun time being surrounded by all those games and seeing what all the gamers are really interested in and really excited about. But taking it all in for 12 hours in a day, that's tough.
Do you think it's ongoing? I know you said second annual. Was it larger crowds than last year? Is it going to keep growing?
I think they're going to keep on doing it. They've got a good thing going. I think Sony likes what's going on here. I think the publishers and developers like the opportunity to show off their wares at what is considered a good part of the season, for doing this stuff. There's obviously holiday game sales going on, but even for the people who don't have product that's coming out in the next month, being able to get people anticipating things that are going to come out later in the year, especially during the historically dry summer of the year, I think this is a good time to do it. So they'll keep on doing this.
If you're a game studio attached to Sony, is this something you want to do as well as E3?
I think so. It's getting so much of, being able to get the end consumers really excited about your stuff. They really matter. E3 is still not quite a full-on consumer experience. It's still very much for the publishers and developers and distributors, but the individuals matter so much these days. The way that they spread all the excitement, the hype, that's really important. And being able to connect to them in a show where that they're coming into the show already with positive expectations. They're really anticipating what's going to happen, and that can help so much, having that good first step.
That's a good point. Yeah. And when is E3? I mean, I go to E3 maybe every other year. I go to GDC every year. So GDC I know is always March, but when is E3? Is it July?
Oh man, I think it's June, right?
Is it June?
I'm gonna look at this. No,
It never stays in my brain.
Yeah, it is. It's June.
June.
June
So we're
14th.
talking 6 months. So the PlayStation experience is kind of 6 to 7 months ahead of E3. So it's kind of a nice halfway through. And it's right before Christmas. You know, it's really smart. Get everybody playing your games right before the holidays, announce your releases.
Yeah, definitely.
Does Xbox have anything like this?
No, not really. It's funny. Yeah, Microsoft doesn't have one like this. Nintendo doesn't. Actually, Nintendo used to have something like this back in the early 2000s in Japan. You know, there would be Tokyo Game Show, which is kind of like Japan's E3. But then Nintendo would do their Space Worlds, and they had all Nintendo all the time, happening usually a few weeks removed from Tokyo Game Show. They would have a show all to themselves. But they actually haven't done that in quite a few years now. So yeah, I think probably more guys will do this nowadays because you've got Sony doing this, and they're doing a bang-up job of this. But even beyond that, the individual game systems themselves are part of the social networks that people interact with, and trying to use that and create momentum. It's a really powerful tool, and if they can do it, I think they will. We'll probably see more of this. I would be very surprised if a Microsoft event like this didn't show up in the coming years.
Yeah, I think it would be very useful for the other studio. Well, then again, I could see. So here are all the thoughts that went through my head. Why wouldn't all of the consoles do a private, just them convention? Makes sense. But then I could see it not being something that they could maintain because, you know, the game industry financially flexes up and down. And if it got real tight for them, the first thing they'd want to, you know, one of the major things I should say they'd want to let go is not to have this private convention, which now it's not going to be attended very well if people see it come and then see it go and then see it come. That's a thought that goes through my mind. And then, so then maybe the other consoles have thought about it, but aren't doing it because they're saying, let's just stick to E3. It's a standard. But by just doing E3, even, well, you know, maybe they get the same exposure in E3. I'll tell you, I wish I would have gone to the PlayStation experience. Don't get me wrong. But I wonder, since they only used one part of the Moscone, if they got the same kind of game, the same number of games, if they counted on the same kind of exposure that they normally count on at E3. I think its timing is better than to have it near Christmas, though. You know, it's a great time for developers to take a break. Then again, you know, how many studios have you worked at that? Let's see, we're in November. No, we were always done by now. You know, so
you were shopping for Christmas, yeah.
I wouldn't recommend them doing it in October when everybody's working, you know, some hardcore hours. But you know, the end of November, that's a pretty smart move. I think most studios have pretty much wrapped up for the development, getting ready for those weeks off at Christmas. Are you guys doing a week off for Christmas?
Yeah. We're gonna have a Christmas break. You know, I think you would have enjoyed PlayStation Experience because one of the games that was announced there was a little bit of a surprise. There is a PlayStation VR version of Rez. Rez is, well, I love Rez. What do you think of Rez, first of all?
Rez, not my favorite game.
Oh, really?
But I'm, you know, I mean, I fall under that category of, I'm not a casual gamer, but I'm not a hardcore gamer. I can't stand puzzle games because they take up too much time. And so
wait a minute. Are we confusing games though? I mean, Rez is not exactly a puzzle game.
No. I'm just generalizing who I am as a gamer.
Okay, all right.
Because I have a kid and I have, business responsibilities, I find so little time to game.
Okay.
So what I want to do is I want to like choose a time to game that I can get a bunch of people together. I want it to be a social event. And then I almost never, I can't even tell you the last time I played a single player game.
Okay.
So I want to just be with a bunch of people and play for like 4 or 5 hours and just really dig into it. And I'll do that like 2 or 3 times over the span of a couple of weeks. And then I don't game for another 6 months. And so when that happens, it's like, for me, it's Diablo or it's Civilization or it's, Call of Duty or something. And I dig in. So it's not that it, I mean, hell, don't look to me for advice on what's a good game. Cause just cause I don't like it doesn't mean it's not selling like wild cakes, but it doesn't fall into my range of games that kind of I play.
Well, Rez is pretty interesting because I think that Rez is actually, seminal when it comes to audio and games. I think there's actually quite a bit of influence in Rez, even though it really wasn't the most successful game when it came out for both the Sega Dreamcast is, the Sega Dreamcast was a great system with a great library, but not exactly a breakout hit. But Rez, I think, was really a wonderful game, and the audio was part of it. It's the way that everything was just so coherent and so musically aligned. The sync with everything that was going on the screen. It was a crazy melange of stuff happening on the screen, and everything connects with this music, and you feel like you're dancing with the music, you're grooving with the music, and for some people, it even feels like they're making the music as they're playing ostensibly a very simple on rails shooting game. And it's a very short game, actually.
Oh, is it?
You can actually play through all 5 levels of it in the space of an hour or an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's actually quite an interesting, I actually think it's a very good case for a game as meditation. I'm going to think and ponder about what can be done, either what can be done physically in terms of your hand-eye coordination, or orally in terms of what is actually conjured up by the game system. I think Rez is quite cool, and it's back in the limelight because Rez is coming out for the PlayStation 4 in the form of Rez Infinite, and it's going to be a PlayStation VR game. Which is cool. The original Rez had that crazy vibration pack that you plug in via the USB into the PS2.
The trance vibrator.
Yes, the trance vibrator, and it would vibrate along to the music that was going on, and it really got you into the groove. And for some people, it got you into quite a bit more than just the groove of the music. It's such an interesting game. I do wonder how well it's going to actually make that transition to VR. Because
it came out, there was an HD version, right?
There was an HD version. Yeah, they made it for Xbox 360, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
But I
now,
wonder how it's going to be in VR.
So now for the uninitiated, explain how Sony PlayStation is doing VR. What do you got to buy? What's it going to be like?
So Sony VR, it's coming, hopefully soon. It's a headset. It's a VR headset. It looks really nice. Looks like a really smooth piece of gear, which is quite a contrast to the Oculus Rift, which is probably the big VR unit that everyone knows about. The Oculus Rift looks cool. The Sony PlayStation VR looks quite a bit sleeker. But probably more importantly, it has headphones built into the unit, which is quite different from the Oculus. It seems like Sony cares quite a bit more about the audio experience compared to the Oculus Rift guys.
Yeah.
They've been, from my own dealing with other developers for PlayStation VR, it seems like Sony cares quite a bit about making sure that the audio experience in all their VR games is quite good. So
So
that's.
no vomiting.
Oh,
Has
sorry.
there,
What was that?
has there been any vomiting? Are you saying it's good in the fact that people aren't getting motion sickness? They're being very careful about that.
I did not notice any puddles of vomit while I was at PlayStation Experience. There were actually quite a few people who say that Sony's PlayStation VR has really sold them on VR. There were a lot of people talking positively about the various demos that they had there. London Heist came up quite a few times as a really amazing VR experience.
That sounds like an exciting
Rig,
game.
yeah, Rigs also came up as a really positive VR experience. That was a battle mech game.
Oh, Rigs?
Yes.
I'm typing it down for show notes.
Yeah, so it seems like people are really liking what PlayStation VR is doing.
You know, if they do Rigs, you know what they should do? They should put in Battle Zone as a like secret level for your VR.
Man,
Wouldn't that be hilarious?
I kind of miss those old. I miss the old battle zones, the old arenas.
Oh man, you know what gets me about VR? I miss that too. But the thing is, when I game, I sit down, and with VR, I got to stand up and game now. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I could sit down, but then I got to turn around, and I don't have 360 really kind of motion. I obviously will limit my visibility by not being able to do an exorcist with my head. But so I'm standing up and I'm gaming, but I don't want to stand up for hours in games. So how affected is the design going to be of games based on them being virtual reality and now you're standing to play rather than sitting?
Yeah, that'll be tough. You know, I mentioned that Res is might have a tough transition because you're flying, and in many of the levels, at least in the original Res, you would be actually moving and flying in totally different directions, and your orientation might be really crazy. I think level 3, you're playing against the boss, and sometimes you're flying backwards looking at the boss, and then sometimes you're flying and you're looking up and the boss is coming towards you, and as the boss rotates around you, you're constantly having to move around and look, and I wonder if that'll be a really disorienting experience. Rigs, along with other VR games, there are quite a few VR games where you are in a vehicle, so you're in a mech combat, or modern zombie taxi company, you're in a car and you're driving a vehicle, and it makes sense to, I can sit down and drive this car, and I'm always going to be oriented with the car. So
they've probably put a rear view mirror kind of thing in the VR so you can see behind you as you would naturally in a car. Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. And you know, the other thing that gets to me is like, so I bought one of the new Apple TVs, but it reminded me of something I was being sold, and they asked me if I wanted the tether. And I thought it was at the Apple store. Huh. Well, I can't remember what it was now, but I thought it was like the same day, and I thought it was Apple product. But anyway, there was something that I was buying, and they wanted to know if I wanted this tether. And I couldn't imagine how. Maybe I dreamt this now that I think about it.
No, I think you're right. I have heard people talk about that because you can use the Apple TV remote as a game controller now.
That's what it was. It was the Apple TV remote. Thank you. I thought maybe I was going crazy. Yeah, they wanted to know if I wanted a tether for my wrist for the Apple TV remote. And I thought, no. You know, although I remember the stories of people throwing a Wii through the television. So now you've got this person with VR helmet standing up and playing by themselves. You know, right now is a good time to get into health insurance, I think, if you want to make some money. Because can you imagine how many people are going to fall over?
Yeah, It's gonna be crazy. Hold on, I gotta. Where's this picture? I'm gonna see if I can find a picture of Tetsuya Mizuguchi over the last 24 hours because he was wearing the craziest getup.
I've seen people do the VR inside that ball where they have like these socks on and they walk and they've got something attached to their hips, which is pretty cool. But that's, you know, that's quite an accessory for you to just game. Maybe a bunch of bungee cords, you know, put in a bunch of eye screws into your walls, attach the bungee cords to there, wear some belt and attach the bungee cords to the belt, and then you won't fall over using your VR helmet. What do you think? What is this?
Oh, this is what it looks like. So when they did the Res Infinite reveal at the PlayStation Expo, they actually showed a dude wearing this getup. And okay, we have to do more than the trance vibrator. Well, this is certainly more than the trance vibrator. The whole suit is glowing and pulsing to the game and the music. So beyond that, it was shown that it was the original creator of Res, Tetsuya Mizuguchi, actually in the suit.
I'll tell you what, it looks really cool. But ADR, or AKA ADR, made a good point. He said virtual reality and a vibrator. Let's not go there. But that suit, the whole suit is now doing it.
It is crazy.
Should we do a show on adult games is what I'm thinking, because I think there's definitely going to be, you know, the music would be really easy for those games because we just need a wah pedal.
See, that's kind of funny.
I mean, we
actually, while I was in Japan,
people are going to use these things the wrong way, anyway, or the right way, however you want.
You're talking about music for adult games. So while I was in Japan, I actually got a bunch of game soundtracks for adult games, you know, or you know, games with erotic content and whatnot.
Yeah.
A lot of the games that I was looking for were actually from back in the mid and late 90s. And they actually sounded pretty neat. They sounded very jazz fusion.
Yeah,
some of them actually sounded really quite progressive, and it was kind of cool. And I had one version of the soundtrack for this one game called, what was it called? Kizuatsu. Yeah, Japanese erotic game. And the original soundtrack was done with FM synth, so ad-lib, Yamaha OPN, that stuff. And then they also made a new version of the soundtrack that was done by a proper band, you know, bass, keys, alto sax, doing this progressive jazz stuff. It was really quite cool.
Yeah, just because of the content doesn't mean the music has to be cheesy. Not that the content's cheesy. Whatever floats your boat, go get it. You know, there's been plenty of discussions about having erotic games or bringing certainly a more R-rated feel sexually to games for a long time, and there are votes on both sides of that, and it really comes down to, you know, there is some of that for you to find, and I don't think that we're in a position where any major companies are going to release that kind of stuff right now, but you know, a game's a game, and it's kind of funny because emotionally we try to attach people as much as we can to games, and in some ways that's all about emotion, those erotic games and things like that. But you know, speaking of sound for games and gingerly stepping out of this subject matter, which you can't deny with this vibrating suit in virtual reality, what do you think is going to happen with VR when it comes to audio? You know, right now, surround sound, as we know it, is an experience that is completely different than the way our ears actually interpret the world around us. It's heavy in the front, 2 speakers when you go 5.1 or 7.1. It's obviously fake. It's positioning and panning more than it is the natural sound of being out in a wilderness and hearing a bird chirp, you know? And so you've got ambisonics and things like that to try to, you know, they say they are an accurate representation of what you naturally hear. So when you're doing a VR helmet, I imagine right now the default is is stereo sound with a false 5.1 on top of it so that you can get the feeling of things around you. But since you're wearing a VR helmet with headphones, stereo is your limitation. Would ambisonics be something that people would look into for VR, that we should be paying closer attention to? What else is out there for VR? What do you think?
Yeah, it's certainly tough. The thing that I've been hearing is that a lot of the VR experiences are actually relatively simple in terms of their design. They're very immersive with what's going on visually, but actually a whole lot of the audio mixes that people have been hearing in these games have been really quite simple. And I don't mean like, oh, we're not hearing hundreds of tracks. We're hearing tens of tracks. It's actually even less than that. It's really quite simple. And I think it sort of boils down to this idea in VR that's sort of subverted away from what we've got with traditional games. When it comes to the organization of sound, I think that there is typically this idea of diegetic versus non-diegetic sound, right? You've got the sound that is ostensibly the sound of the world, environmental sounds, explosions, and whatnot. And then you've got the non-diegetic sound, which is things like the musical soundtrack and interface elements that you as the player might hear, but maybe Solid Snake doesn't hear that, Mario doesn't hear that. And now that you've got this VR world, for the most part, it's all the same thing. You are the character.
Mm-hmm.
And even more than in first-person shooter games, this divide between diegetic and non-diegetic sounds is increasingly tough to actually navigate and really mix. How do you actually respond to these sounds that are going to happen in your world? And I think most of the demos that have actually been shown have been quite simple and have assumed that actually, no, everything is going to be just diegetic sound. You're going to be hearing this. If it's an interface element, well, then in fact it is the sound of the helmet chirping at you that oxygen is low, and not some external abstract sound element trying to alert you, the player.
Yeah.
And now the mixes are actually quite a bit simpler. And that's an interesting thing, especially since it seems like it's in sharp contrast to the overall concept of you want you to be immersed in this super rich environment. So it's a funny thing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some.
So is there a leader in the area yet?
Well, it's hard to say because we don't have any real product. Everything that's out there is just a demo. I've heard some good demos with Oculus Rift and Fmod. I heard that the Gollum demo that was being not demo, but it's being shown elsewhere. I don't think Gollum was actually on the show floor at PlayStation Experience, but proper context. Gollum is a new PlayStation VR game in development by Highwire Games. And Highwire Games is founded by Marty O'Donnell, famously audio director of Bungie. And he cares about audio a lot, and he's been talking a lot about HRTF and how the sound that you hear is just going to be so connected to you, such an important anchor point. In the game, you play as this character, and this character is also ostensibly controlling a golem in the game. And being able to hear both from the character's perspective as well as from the golem's perspective is really a super interesting idea that I would like to check out, and hopefully in the future I will. The fact that everything is still in this demo state, I think it's going to be a few more months before we really have a good idea of where the real successes are in the industry for VR games.
Well, so we're like anything else, we're going to have a Betamax versus VHS,
Yes.
Blu-ray versus what was it, HD?
Oh yeah, HD DVD, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got, and it's not just that. We also have that Samsung Gear, right?
Uh,
Yeah. Just you got the not well. There's Google Cardboard, the very
yeah.
cheap end,
Yeah.
which I suppose you can use with headphones. I've tried some of those. I haven't really seen any good audio experiences with either the Samsung Gear or Google Cardboard. They're just very much focused on the VR 3D aspect of it. But
Well, I'm
I think
interested to
with
see where it
Sony,
goes. Oh,
yeah, with
sorry about that.
Sony's got the headphones built in. I think that's when we're going to really see, oh, this is an audio experience that's crafted for this thing. You know, if you get that, you know you're going to get the audio that the designers are actually intending.
Now, are they earbud headphones that are plugged in?
No, they rest on the ear.
Oh, okay, okay. So you could put drivers in these then, right? So you could turn it into a 5-1 experience by putting multiple speakers inside that each earphone, right?
You know, I suppose they could.
Because if you got an array of speakers in each one, you can fire them at different volumes and different mixes to give you the sense that something's behind you or in front of you.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that is a possibility. I wonder if there's. I wonder if there is going to be any more changes to the spec of the VR. Or if it's pretty much set right now. I mean, Sony still hasn't announced a proper date, so who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when is it? Yeah. Who's going to come out first? I think, personally, I think Oculus Rift better get on the ball because I kickstarted that and got that crappy first edition.
The second one is quite good, you know.
Yeah. I get motion sickness from Call of Duty. Imagine how I felt when I put that VR. I didn't think before I gave them money. That would not be the first time or the last time I've said that statement. I didn't think before I gave somebody money. Hey, have you checked out the Blue MoFi headphones?
Um, no, actually, I haven't.
I'm hitting you with a surprise. I was thinking about getting some of these. And speaking of headphones and VR, I was trying to think of what would be the best experience see, back to VR for a second, just to explain what my thought pattern was. So I've got this VR helmet on, right? And let's say I don't want headphones because I want to get a true experience of surround sound. But the problem is that if I run the game through my PlayStation, which is coming out my 5.1 on my home system, and I've got the VR helmet on, as soon as I turn this way, then I've broken their surround sound. Therefore, that's why I was leaning towards ambisonics, where no matter where I turn, I'm going to hear what the environment would sound like. And I'm sure that they would have some sort of tether that tied into where I'm looking. The game would adjust audio. Like say wind is blowing at my face and I turn to the side, even in ambisonics, that wind should be blowing stronger in my ear. And so I'm sure they'll have a sense of where your head is in space, but still I'm on a speaker system in my house rather than headphones. And so I was trying to think of how to get it on headphones so that you can just have that all in one unit and not have to depend upon these exterior speakers as well. And then now you've got yourself in this private gaming situation where you're sitting on the couch at 2 a.m., not disturbing anybody and playing. And then that led me to the Blue MoFi speakers because they have these new headphones that, well, they've been out like a year because I saw them at NAMM last year. And they've got drivers in them. They're supposed to be really high fidelity. And I was curious, now that you've come through my thought pattern, you're welcome. If you've put them on, what you thought of them. What do you think of driven headphones?
I remember when I was looking at it, I thought this is a pretty cool concept. It's basically like you got the headphones, but it's also bundling a really good amp inside there to also drive, instead of relying on whatever's in your iPhone, or perhaps an even worse phone that has just a bad headphone out jack. So it seems like a good concept, but I actually haven't tried them. I haven't heard them. I've heard very good things about them, but haven't tried them myself.
Haven't either, and I'm always afraid to with hype. For instance, Beats. I'm probably not going to win any fans here, but I think they sound terrible, and yet they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Those Beats headphones, but it's personal preference. I was just curious if you had a chance to put them on because I'm resistant to the hype.
It's not that bad. Well, Blue definitely has their reputation there.
Yeah, they do, and I love Blue microphones.
I haven't had any Blue. I haven't had any bad Blue experiences. Even their cheap ones. You know, the Spark is actually a very decent microphone.
Is it really?
Yeah, and the Baby Bottle is a very decent microphone. They're all quite good. And then you have their nice microphones, like their like the proper Bottle Rocket and the Woodpecker. I actually heard a Woodpecker. A guitarist friend has that and thinks it's absolutely fantastic. So
the one I have, I don't know where it falls in that range, but I have the Dragonfly, which I think sounds wonderful.
Oh yeah, the Dragonfly is really nice. It has a really funky looking design, and yeah, it's pretty cool. They definitely got that design thing going on.
Yeah. I did find out that though, I learned something with the Dragonfly, which might be helpful, is when you go do a mic shootout, don't use your own voice because you, the engineer, aren't the one doing the recording of yourself. Yeah. And I chose the Dragonfly because I was like, oh my God, this sounds fantastic, but it sounded good for me. And I've used it on a lot of people, and it didn't sound so great on them. But I use it for guitar a lot. It's a really great acoustic guitar microphone. It's very good. So that takes me to the next place. So ambisonic microphones. Are we going to see a push for a new type of or a more popular type of microphone? Multiple heads?
I don't know. I think it's I mean, if the Sony spec is locked and also with the Oculus, most people are going to be using their own headphones with it, unless the spec changes all of a sudden and they decide they need to put headphones on it. It's probably just going to be straight up binaural stuff. And if that's going to be the case, maybe I think maybe more people are going to be going around doing, I don't know, Jekyll and disc recordings. Or maybe maybe some of your really fancy pants guys are going to be doing the Neumann head. Ambisonics, they're really interesting, and having that height information in there is cool too. But it is an assumption. But if the Sony VR spec remains locked, I think it's more likely we're going to go back to those other recording methods, like Jekyll and disc and whatnot.
You're breaking up again, Vince.
Oh, sorry about that.
Do that. No, you're fine. Just do that magic adjustment you did earlier. It was working perfectly.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I think stereo recording is pretty cool. Breaking out the discs, it's really quite fun. I've actually was thinking about that rather recently when I was catching myself. Why am I going back to that old idea of either the coincident pair or Blumline stereo? You could do some really cool things with spaced stereo, spaced cardioid, even spaced hypercardioid. I remember when I was a kid and I saw that there was I can't remember what it was being recorded, but he was recording it was something in my high school, and he was recording with these old CAD E100s, and these were these super cardioid mics, and they're placed rather far apart, and they're that's not typically what you would do with them, with that particular polar pattern. And no, that's kind of strange. The little that I learned about recording and mic techniques from issues of Recording Magazine back in the 90s. And then I heard the final product and I thought, oh, that actually sounds really good. Okay, I need to think more about, there's more than just coincident microphones for stereo recording.
Yeah. How many did he have? Did he have it like on a stick that had a grouping of them in a circle?
No, it was actually just it, it was just, well, let's see. It's kind of, the best way I could describe it is it looks kind of like Decatree,
Okay.
except wow, these things are really spaced far apart.
Oh,
And
okay.
the CAD is definitely not like a Neumann M50 in terms of response. Um, so I was very surprised at the whole thing, but it worked really well. It ended up in a really good final product.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm thinking, how would I set up with the microphones that I have right now a way to capture everything that I'm hearing? And I was thinking that you would have to have bleed, obviously, into the microphones to get that cohesive kind of sound all the way across. And if a bird chirps here, I want the microphone over here to get a very faint version of it, because it's the way my ears work.
Mhm.
And there is, as Matt M had stated in the chat room, there is also, I lost the term, didn't I? I can never think of it. I never think of it. And then he brought it up smartly. I'm scrolling back just to
Talk
see.
about virtual microphones.
No, binaural stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so there's actually a headset which we've talked about on the show before that I still have. It's a recording. It's earbuds, but they record right and left. And the difficulty with those is if I turned my head, I broke the plane, so that stunk. But I used them a couple times to go into loud places and record, which I can't say on this show because people could, and capture the screams of the crowd and the excitement and stuff like that. And it had to sit very still, which was very difficult. But it did work pretty well on playback. I could definitely, I felt that stereo image was more real than it would have been with two microphones, mostly because I think the spacing between my ears matched what I was hearing. So it might not have been real for a person that had a smaller head than me or a bigger head than me. I don't know. That stereo width is a tricky thing.
Yeah, it really is.
Speaking of which, do you ever go stereo width on your? Oh wait, I think you had something. I'll wait on you.
Oh, well, I guess I was gonna allied into something, but
Yeah, go for it.
I was gonna say, speaking of loud places, have you heard of Majestica?
Well, I listened to the demos.
It's so Majestica is a new sound library that features a 200-piece orchestra for the low price, $499. You can get a nice big old contact library that features a 120-piece string library. I think it's a 60-piece brass ensemble, or was it 80? Something huge. Choir, woodwind section, not a complete woodwind section because they don't care about double reeds at all. They just care about a big ass section of bass clarinets and contrabassoons, and a big ass sections of flutes and alto flutes. And it's really, really crazy. It's huge.
It is. And on that front, go ahead. Sorry.
Does this have to be this huge? Why do you want things to be this huge?
So I want to add in that, and I don't know how these guys do that. Apparently companies and their NDAs must be the worst, because have you ever noticed that somebody will release a game and then all the other game companies will release the same type of game at the same time? The spy network in the game industry is amazing. And the same thing for the library company, because 8DO comes out, releases Majestica or announces it, and within 2 days, Orchestral Tools, link in the chat, announces Metropolis. Same deal, huge orchestra of stuff.
Wow, okay, I'm looking at this. The Monumental Orchestra.
Yeah, look at the bottom.
Okay.
The last thing they say.
It is a revolution of epic in one single box. The next generation of Fortissimo.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. People like loud, I guess. People like epic as well. Well, what do you think? Do you think you need a really, really, really epic sounding orchestra?
Well, I think that I already have that in my libraries. I could layer stuff. I could do all kinds of things.
Hmm.
You know, getting loud doesn't mean it's good. And that's always been a problem with audio is people perceive louder as being better.
Hmm.
And so I can see a lot of trouble mixing this library, especially if somebody starts layering something on. If you told me here's just the string section, just the percussion section, and that's it. This library comes with, and the horns brass section. This library comes with 3 presets, and that's it. And then you add to that. Okay, that might be useful to me. It gets me to a richer, maybe place with the orchestration than I would have to build on my own by adding these strings and those cellos and these basses and those, you know, brass. I could build it on my own if I wanted to.
Hmm.
But if you're just going to do a preset, then I can see this being useful if you think that these presets are louder than what you've got from Symphobia or something. But or not louder. See, I hate to say that. Richer is what I'm shooting for. But they're not just that. They've got all kinds of stuff. So can you imagine getting an orchestration from somebody who just, my goodness, I mean, nobody, sorry, I'm just thinking out loud, but I don't know many people who concentrate their orchestration on just one library. It's usually a mix of like a little bit of Symphobia and a little bit of something else like East West, maybe some Sonokinetic like I'm doing. You know, maybe it's a mix of things. So if the person writing with Metropolis or with what's the other one called, Majestica, just use that stuff alone, then they would be tempted to use the other stuff in the library other than a preset of a section.
Hmm.
And now the mix is going to be, you know, ironically, if you start to compress, you're probably going to lose the power. And if you don't compress, you've got such peaks, you're going to have to add the limiter. And now it's just a brick wall. So it's almost like, as my brain has come to this through a conversation, it's almost like these libraries are the brick walling of orchestral writing rather than, and they certainly sounded that way. When I listened to the demos, they were very loud. Not a lot of headroom, I didn't feel. There's my opinion, my riffing opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of me that's interested in checking it out. Just uh, it's just such a curiosity in my mind, rather than something that I'm really considering adding to my workflow. Uh, I, I've got my orchestral template, and it's very much predicated on having control over what's going on. And it's funny because 8DO actually talks a lot about the control that they have on offer for a lot of their other libraries. Like Adagio Strings is very flexible. It's quite a controllable string library. They don't really talk about that much here. So I'm really less interested in this, as well as Metropolis. Okay, cool. It's a huge orchestra and choir. That's cool. Um, it features the loudest imaginable dynamics, starting from mezzo forte upwards to fortissimo.
Did you stutter, sir? Did you stutter?
No, that's how many F's are in there. And you know, I think having control is just so much more important. You know, it's cool to have a big sound. It's also cool to have a really good sound as well. You know, you know, I wouldn't say that these libraries sound bad, but I would be much more interested in seeing how controllable are these things. And,
well, with that said, I am a fan of orchestral tools, so I want to make that known. I like the idea of the library when I was first reading about Metropolis, because they advertise it as being kind of a hearkening, I don't know what the term is, a calling back to the 1927 science fiction epic Metropolis. And I thought, okay, if you're going to make a vintage sounding orchestral library, I'm throwing my money at the screen. There's no doubt about that, because that's something I strive to do in everything I record. And that's why I use so much Mellotron behind the scenes, because I'm always trying to get those scratchy strings in there and have that kind of, that's just something I like to listen to. And so if they said, well, you're still going to get 96, but we ran it through a filter that made it sound like it was coming off a Victrola, that's pretty cool to me. I am totally into that. And I would buy it, but that's not really where they went. They almost, I kind of feel like they missed the mark when I was listening to the demo, because it didn't remind me of that ancient movie.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't really think Metropolis while I was watching it, unless, I mean, I guess the video footage they shot of the recording sessions was in black and white. That's cool. Metropolis was a black and white movie. That's cool. Yeah. Of course, I got to say, it is cool that these things are so affordable. I remember when I was a kid, kid figuratively, I mean, I was in college, and I thought, wow, the symphonic cube, when Vienna Library first talked about that, it's like, a couple of thousands of bucks, right? Yeah. And then you can get this Metropolis orchestra for 350 euros, which is, about that many dollars as well. And Majestica is 500 bucks. And yeah. It's, for as much as I bemoan this, I think it's a trend because both of these guys are coming out at the same time. It is kind of a golden age if you're a music composer that wants to get as much capability as he can get outside of that one box that is his Windows or Mac. It's pretty cool that.
The prices have been coming down. I couldn't believe that Albion is where it is right now. I think Spitfire sounds really good, and it's the next on my list to get. One thing I like that they did, Orchestral Tools did, is if you look at Metropolis, it says it's 349 euros instead of 549 plus VAT, which we don't have to worry about. Pre-order special ends release date, which is December 17th. And below that, they said another intro special deal starts after the release until July 1st. Now,
wow. Okay.
I respect that, because oftentimes I go, you know what? I want to get this, but I can't right now. And so I'm going to miss out on $200 savings. And what they're saying is, okay, we're going to raise the price from $349, but it's probably not going to be $549 until after January 1st. And I thought, that's pretty cool. That's good. That's good. Good business, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. It is nice to have that. It feels like those companies, and these companies are not really huge companies.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they're they do care about their customers, and
I've always wanted to have the ability to contact somebody who's doing a sale and say, listen, I'm a guaranteed buy. Here's my credit card, but you can't run this until this date, and that date happens to be after your sale, but I still want the sale price.
Oh yeah.
I wonder if one day that's going to happen.
Hey, maybe. There's all sorts of neat ways that people are making. Hey, I guess the word is monetizing, right? All sorts of neat ways for monetization to happen these days.
So the one thing I wanted to bring up about these libraries having huge strings, Lumina brought up in the chat room. I have a full collection, everything they ever did on LP, of 101 strings. Are you familiar with the band or the orchestra 101 strings?
I've heard 101 strings, yes.
They've done some amazing records from the 1950s, late 50s, up until, I think, just the 70s, maybe the early 80s. I don't remember. I'm so stoked that Lumina, I don't know how to say that. Am I saying it? I'm sure I'm butchering that, just like I do. I word very badly, and I think I worded that badly. So I love those records. You don't have any idea how often I will just put one in on the weekend. My wife starts rolling her eyes now because there's just some amazing records done there. If you get interested, look up 101 Strings Wiki and Lumina. Oh, beautiful. Thank you for correcting that. Lumina. Yeah, definitely wiki them and read the history. It's pretty interesting. what happened there. So I thought that was pretty cool that she brought that up. And so now we have these orchestras with 100+ strings. Are they going to sound more lush, or are you okay with 20 or 30 strings in your orchestra?
I think, well, I think that people now are realizing more than ever all the possibilities that there are beyond just really big and epic. Although it's still surprising how many people that are out there looking to get into the music world, especially for games and film, and they'll say that their particular style is epic trailer music, you know.
Mm.
But I think actually going back to the Sony PlayStation experience, you did have those big booths that were occupied by Just Cause and Uncharted and other big games. There's actually quite a significant amount of space that's devoted to all those small indies. And they're making their game. It's going to come out on PlayStation Network. And it's not about a hero looking to save the world or some big epic adventure or a huge military sci-fi type setting.
Mm-hmm.
It's about something else entirely. And it's cool to see that not just on the music side, people are hoping that video games have different sounds to them, but on the development side as well, they're asking all their music composers to do something that's rather different because they realize now that they need to do something different in terms of art, in terms of game design, in terms of setting. So everything has to be coherent, and it's really cool. I had a lot of fun going through the corners and aisles, literally the corners and aisles, because they put all the smaller developers and publishers on the edges of the expo floor.
Yeah.
But it was nice to just check out all these things that were coming out for the PlayStation 4 from these 5-man, 6-man bands. That was really different, and they had really different, neat, unique sounds, like unique in the real sense of the word. Oh, that is a different soundtrack than I have heard before, and that's really cool.
I think that's one of the greatest things about indie right now is that is possible.
Mm-hmm.
I've certainly told my stories about trying to do some unique soundtracks, and one particular story in the early days of this show that I shared that I'm not going to bore people with now, but I delivered what I was asked to, and then they said, nah, never mind, because it wasn't basically John Williams-y enough. And that's so disappointing to have that happen. But that was I don't want to say pre-indie. Indie's been around, as long as the game industry. The game industry started from indie, but it was pre the indie industry as we see it today. Mm-hmm. And now I totally reach out to games that I'm interested in, try to find a game that doesn't have an idea what they're going to do with the audio yet, and present a bunch of stuff that I think would be fitting, not just grabbing generic stuff out of my demo archives, but just grabbing stuff that I think fits their art style or something I'm seeing that they've put together as a movie, and say, I'm interested in helping you guys, and here's something that I think would be really interesting. And I've landed a couple of gigs just by reaching out to either people that are trying to do Kickstarters or keep your thumb on the pulse of what's happening in the indie community. And I would never be able to do that. I can't go to Infinity Ward where I have hundreds of friends literally, and because of Neversoft, got enveloped by them, and just say, here is my next soundtrack that is nothing like you expected, but I think it would fit Call of Duty really well. And even though that's true, I totally have stuff that I think would fit Call of Duty. I think they should really change the sound of Call of Duty. But again, they're re-releasing Call of Duties because it's a known product, and they have to just keep delivering that recipe. They know people like their cupcakes. Don't change the recipe. Just keep making those cupcakes with subtle additions, and that's the way you stay alive with that kind of game, which is too bad.
Well, some companies, even the big companies, like I gotta do the shout out to my friend Austin Wintory, because he did that soundtrack for Assassin's Creed Syndicate. And it was cool that Ubisoft reached out to him and said, we're going to go for a different sound. So,
That's true.
Feel free to try some different things. And he did something different. It's a very small chamber sound. It's kind of a he calls it post Mendelssohn, which is really interesting. Because Mendelssohn is ostensibly a romantic, but he's actually kind of a neoclassical at the time, and it's it's a really cool sound. It ends up going incredibly well with the game.
Yeah.
So that's so even with the big companies, they're realizing the need to do different things.
Yeah, I hope so. You did name the one though that has always been experimental with their soundtracks, because think back to Amon Tobin soundtrack for what's the name of the game with the spy? Can't think of it. Anyway, I can't think of the name of the game, but I know exactly who did it, and I have the soundtrack, and I listen to it in my car because it's just amazing stuff. As a matter of fact, I'd never heard of Amon Tobin before having that game, and it was such a perfect sound for that game where you're sneaking through
Splinter Cell.
Splinter Cell. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Pandora Tomorrow, I think, was the second one he did for them, but the first one is just so good. And that's a good example of a game that I played because of the music. And then I found that the music fit the game so well that it really immersed you in the mood of sneaking around and trying to find spies or being a spy and not getting caught. The multiplayer in that game was just fabulous. Today, if I played the game, I bet you my brain, what I think the game looks like in my brain, is completely high res, high def compared to what it actually is if I were to sit down and play the game today.
Well, that's the Xbox One for you,
Yeah. Chaos Theory, Splinter Cell Chaos Theory. So yeah, you're right. The big companies, there are some big companies out there who do see that we need to do interesting things. And we the last thing I'll say on the subject is that as a game industry, we kind of picture ourselves as the kid brother of the movie industry, and movies do that a lot. They've got all kinds of interesting soundtracks to their typical kind of, as Joseph Campbell has said, there's only so many stories you can tell, and the movies are going to tell them over and over and over. And if we assigned a type of music to that story, here's a Romeo and Juliet story, here's a romantic orchestra. If we did that every single time, it would be boring. And so since the story can't change, other things have to change: the visuals, the surroundings, the telling of the story to be more modern than something old, and the audio has to change for it as well. But the game industry still feels stuck in these typical kind of situations, except for, as you've mentioned, Ubisoft is definitely reaching out, and the indie community definitely needs the help. And it's going to put them on the board. If you go up to an indie person, I believe personally, this is Kyle Johnson, if you go up to an indie developer and say, I'm going to produce for you a stereotypical soundtrack that won't make your game special, that's going to sound like what people are going to expect, you're not going to get the job. And if you go up and say, I'm going to really dedicate myself to this and come up with something unique that together we think is really going to separate us from the pack, you're probably going to get, at least another phone call.
That's true. We could keep on going with this conversation for a while, because my brain is immediately thinking of, but wait, once you start thinking about using games and pitching games for completion funding to publishers and people with money and what they're asking for, but then that's a whole other conversation, and we've already gone way past an hour.
I know. Well, then we're picking that up on next week. Let's start with that next week and then move on to the other stuff.
That sounds cool. We should do some shout outs. We got to do a shout out to Isotope, for example.
Oh, my goodness. I got so into the subject matter. Thank you, Isotope, for sponsoring the show. We never forget you. There's always one of us that makes sure that we, you know what, to tell you the truth, Isotope would be fine with it because there's such cool people there. I'm excited for NAMM because we are going to hang out with our Isotope sponsors. I've made arrangements for us to meet up with Lexi and say hi and meet some other people. And last year when I was walking around, I sat at the Isotope booth, and they had just released the Connect VST that could send from Pro Tools right over to RX, do your fixes in RX, hit a button, it goes back into Pro Tools, render it, and you're set to go. And man, that was awesome. So yeah, I'm excited. Thank you, Isotope, for sponsoring the show. Thank you to the chatties, man. The room has been busy. I love that. Thanks for joining the show and participating. And if you can, please follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook and tell people how awesome Vince is with his new glasses. And I appreciate it. Vince, I'm going to say bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.